What started as a Saturday morning coffee date turned into a podcast where we chat about things like faith, family, finances, and so much more.
We're just a husband and wife living this devoted life, and we're here to help you live this devoted life too.
If you enjoy this podcast and want to help support our ministry, there are a few things you can do.
Please subscribe to this podcast, leave us a review, and share these episodes with your friends so that you can help them live this devoted life too. Welcome to another episode of This Devoted Life podcast. Today is our last day on our amazing 15-year anniversary trip that we have been on for the past several days. So it's a little bit sad that we're going to be going home, but today was just kind of a rainy day, and we thought it would be kind of a perfect day to record a couple podcasts.
Yeah,
so.
Always a bittersweet time, but we are looking forward to getting back to our 4 kids. But yeah, it has been amazing. So.
It absolutely has. So as you know from all of our previous podcasts, a conversation that we have all the time is the fact that you need to communicate within your marriage. And so we thought it would be kind of fun to talk about 5 different conversations that you could be having with your spouse on a regular basis. And the first one that we want to talk about is spiritual health. This was something that a community member asked for specifically, was how to have spiritual conversations with your spouse.
Yeah, and so we're assuming that both you and your spouse have a similar belief and just basically are doctrinally on the same page, but maybe that question was rooted in, unbeliever versus, your spouse being an unbeliever and you are a believer and you don't know how to approach that. So I think that is a totally separate podcast episode, maybe in the future. Yeah. But just, I guess, real short and sweet on that is, make it irresistible. Christianity and spiritual things and biblical doctrinal beliefs are just as beneficial or actually even more beneficial here on earth than they are for eternity necessarily. So that is something that, just live a salty Christian life and be the person that other people want to be, and they see Christ in you and through you. And I think that does a lot of the talking and kind of just encourages other people to be more open about having spiritual conversations.
Well, the Bible specifically talks about how a husband can be won by the conversation of the wife.
Yes.
And so, how you portray Christianity and your conversation that you can have with your spouse can be the thing that wins them to the Lord.
Yeah, for sure.
So, but that's not what this podcast is about, but we wanted to make sure to address that as we jump into the 5 conversations that you can have with your spouse regularly. And the first one is just, how are you doing spiritually?
Yeah, so a spiritual well check. I think just in general, the theme of this conversation is don't assume that your spouse is doing everything or not doing everything that you think that they're doing. Have conversations about it, because assumptions sometimes lead to just, disbelief, misbelief, frustration, all those things.
Being blindsided by something.
Yeah, being blindsided and just not being on the same page as much as you thought you were. So, that'll kind of ring true throughout this conversation in this episode. But, don't assume. So have that spiritual well check and, just share honestly how you are doing spiritually. Am I in the Bible? Am I praying? Do I have a true relationship with Christ? Or am I just kind of going through the motions right now?
And this conversation is not a condemning, like, I don't think you're reading your Bible anymore.
Yeah, I heard you loud and clear.
No, but this whole podcast started from a Saturday morning coffee date. And these things that we're going to talk about today are things that we discussed, I would say maybe monthly. Like, it's not like something that we would discuss every week where we would go through a checklist of we need to talk about these things, but just how they organically happen. And it's just, hey babe, like, how are you doing spiritually? Are you in the Bible? Are you praying? And it's not a condemning thing. You're actually asking out of a spirit of love and out of a spirit of wanting to encourage, to uplift, and to help your spouse in their spiritual walk.
Yeah. And I know we've brought it up numerous times already, but we're reading through the Bible. Bible together. So this isn't one that we necessarily have to really do a deep dive in right now because we're literally talking about it every day. So it's
Right.
not like you just you either have to check in once a week or, like you said, once a month, or on the flip side, never talk about it. It's
Mhm.
something that it's just, check in with each other or have a good pulse and be talking about spiritual things because that is our spiritual health just permeates through
Mhm.
everything else in our lives, our marriage, how we're parenting, how what kind of an employee or business owner that I am or want to be,
Mm.
things like that. I mean, it's just obviously very important.
Yeah.
So,
And
yeah.
you, as the head of the house, I want to make sure that you are spiritually doing well because I know that that impacts how you are leading our family. And so, me as the wife, am able to support you then better when I know what you need help in.
Yeah, yeah, and obviously it's an accountability thing too, right?
Mhm.
If we're not talking about these things, or if you never ask me about certain things, then it's easy for me to get complacent in it and to not make it a priority,
Mhm.
or let other things creep into my life that shouldn't be in there. And yeah, but if I know that we're going to be talking about this regularly, then it's an accountability tool, and
Absolutely.
it's a way for not only for us to stay on the same page, but for me to stay on point in my
Hmm.
life, and
Definitely.
obviously you as well.
Yeah,
So
definitely. So that is a conversation that we think that we need to have regularly with each other. And obviously
mhm.
this is something everything that we share within these podcasts is stuff that we just hope that you can take something and apply it, but it doesn't have to look like how we're doing it. We're just sharing what we do in hopes of encouraging you to, you know, do something in your marriage as well.
Yeah, so
So,
another area that we talk about regularly are our finances.
mhm.
Financial.
Maybe a little too
Oh, I
regularly.
love finances. I love
Some
numbers.
Sometimes I struggle with that,
Yeah.
going.
Yeah, she puts up with me very well, and every once in a while, yes, like good questions that man, it just keeps me going and eggs me on. So,
No, I'm totally
you love your
teasing.
spreadsheets, right?
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. I love it when the spreadsheets come out. And I say that tongue in cheek because I mean, it's not my thing, but obviously it's very important to James. And so I want to make sure that it is important to me too. And even if it's not important to either of you, in as people, like if finances just aren't your thing, it is still something that you need to be on the same page about because finance is actually
Yeah,
one of those things that can kill a marriage when
it
you're
can.
not on the same page with that. If one spouse is overspending and just running you into debt, or
Mhm.
the other spouse, knows that you're struggling financially but doesn't share that, and then the other spouse is just completely unaware. Those are things that, we believe as a husband and wife, they should be talked about because that is healthy communication within marriage.
Yeah, again, talk about getting blindsided by something. If you aren't on the same page financially, then it can lead to just so many issues, real and perceived. I
Mhm.
mean, honestly, like if I went and bought a bunch of things, and it might not even be that important to us, right? I
Mhm.
mean, it might be 1% of our income, and I just want to go buy it. But you don't know about it. And then all of a sudden I do that, and then 6 months later, you're like, "Well, wait, what's that?" Or maybe it's out in the barn or whatever. And, then it's almost like a distrust thing.
Mhm.
It's like, you didn't think to tell me about that. We used to have kind of a rule if we spend over $100
Yeah. We would call and check
individually,
in
and
with each other,
yeah,
just like, "Hey, do you mind? Like, do we have the budget for this?"
yeah, and that's changed over time, right? But again, we talk about it regularly, so we don't have to worry about not being on the same page, but at the same time, we don't want to just assume that. So we talk
Exactly.
about it so we don't have to worry about it.
Right. And it's not a fun topic or something to do, but spending time creating a budget
Mhm.
is so important for a marriage. Like it can save you a lot of hassle to have a budget,
Yeah.
where you plan out what you are going to spend on food, what you're going to spend on hobbies, what you're going to spend on, your utilities and whatnot. Knowing those things in advance can save you a lot of heartache when you and your spouse are on the exact same page.
Yeah, yeah, and so time is money, or money is time, right? Those are essentially tied directly together in most, employment situations, right? You obviously over time try to disconnect it, time from money as much as possible. But time is one of your love
It
languages or
is.
your biggest love language. So if I am spending too much time either trying to make money or spending money or things like that, then it affects your love language,
Mhm.
right? So that's another reason to stay on the same page with each
And that
other.
was one thing that we actually put into our budget early
Hmm.
in marriage was we had a category called dates, gifts, and hobbies.
Yep.
And we, because my love language is time, we actually allotted
Yeah.
a budget for dates, and just being able to go and do something together. So that was a priority for our marriage.
Hmm.
And so that was something that we literally put into our budget so that we could do that.
Yeah, and it's also another place in marriage to be a little more selfless,
Mm.
where let's say you have a budget, where it's just kind of your mad money every month, and I do too, and I know maybe finances are a little tight this month, and I know you really wanted something. Maybe I can give a little bit of my budget or
Mhm.
whatever, and or vice versa, and it's just something that can be a fun thing, even if you're living paycheck to paycheck and things are a strain or a frustration. Have fun. I mean, in college, sometimes it's really fun to pick up a couch on the side of the road and be like, this thing ain't really, that dirty or whatever. And you bring it into your dorm room or, some type of house that you were living in. And, things are just, randomly fun, or I can't afford to do this. So like, I'm going to sleep in my car. And I'm not saying do that right now in marriage, but like, think back on the difficult times that actually in hindsight were a lot of fun.
Mhm.
And so try to keep things into perspective. Let's say you're way far removed from that, and that's awesome if you are. But like, think back that maybe the most frustrating times, if this is a frustrating time, you'll look back on it almost in an endearing way, right?
Yeah,
So
like just how God was able to draw you together during that
exactly.
time
Yeah.
and the perspective that you had within that. But the one thing I want to circle back to real quick is you said something about my budget and
Hmm.
you said something about mad money, and I want to make sure that we were clear with what you meant on that.
Yeah.
Is
Yep.
literally like within our budget that we had when we were first married is we gave each other out of because we believe in combined
Yeah. I
finances,
was going to
which
say
is a
that's another good.
conversation that we can have
Yeah.
on another time. But
Hmm.
being able to just to say, hey, here's $100 or here's $100 for you and $100 for you, and you can spend it however you want, free from any guilt.
Hmm.
That was what we put into our allotted budget early in marriage, so that if there was something that we really wanted to either save up for or I wanted a new dress or whatever it
Hmm.
was, I could go and do that. And I had, you don't want to call it my money, but it
Yeah.
was just like a free from any guilt. This is what you can just
Yeah.
spend.
Yes,
So
100%. And we say $100. It could be $10 or it could be $10,000 a month. It doesn't matter.
yeah,
The magnitude of the number doesn't matter in this conversation. It's more about just the intent and the conversation
just being on the
and
same
being on the
page.
same page.
Yep.
Yeah, because I mean, again, we're probably all at very different times and levels and things like that. And it's you can make it kind of a fun and challenging thing without having it be like a really tough topic.
Yeah,
And if it has to be a tough topic, then still have the conversation because you'll
exactly.
stay on the same page a
Well,
little
and
bit
the
better.
reason that this is something that we should talk about regularly is just because finances can change, and like
Yeah.
seasons change. And so this needs to be something that is brought up with those changing seasons.
I agree.
So,
Yeah.
yep.
Again, like I've said several times, nothing is permanent here on earth. So, if you're crushing it right now and you could literally spend more money than you ever thought that you could, be careful, right? Success ruins a lot more people than failure does because it's easy to get soft, right? And so stay on point, and these conversations can help you stay on point
Exactly.
and make sure that you're setting yourself up for success in the future. I love talking about the future. I love talking about money. So when we talk about the future and money, those are some good
Which
conversations.
is a really good segue into our third
Yes.
conversation, because this is the one that we actually love talking about. And it's probably not quite a daily thing, but it's pretty regular
Yeah.
is what are your future goals? Like, what do you want to accomplish? What do you want our life to look like? What is something that you personally want to do? And so, as we were planning out this trip, we knew
Yeah.
probably 8 months in advance or whatever.
Hmm.
And so one of our goals was a fitness goal. And that was something that we discussed, and it was something that we helped hold each other accountable. And so these hey, what are your goals? Once again, it's so that you can champion one another in your goals. And they
Yes.
may be slightly different from one another, but I can still be like, hey babe, I know you had this goal for a promotion at work. Like, how is that working?
Right.
Or
Yep.
whatever,
Yeah. Yeah. And so, using that example and that analogy with those fitness goals, we, looked out, let's say 8 months into the future, and this is where we want to be. Okay, good. We're on the same page. And then we broke it down. All right. So for us to be at X in 8 months, we have to be at all of these steps each month. And we just picked the first of the month to weigh in and, do some checks, physical health checks per se. And so throughout that time, there were some frustrations, right?
Yep.
There were letdowns and, oh man, I'm like way over my, weight or, size or whatever I wanted to be at this. But so now you reset and you recalculate. All
Mhm.
right, over the next 5 months, I need to do this, this, and that.
Mhm.
And so those, and then we had some highs too, right? So
Mhm.
you have the highs and lows. It was regular conversation, and it was a team effort,
Yeah.
and for me, it was fun. And, again, it can be frustrating at times or whatever for both of us, but those are what we're talking about. And so specifically, goals, long-term goals, short-term goals, just whatever it is. It could be fitness, spiritual health. These are just goals in general that we love talking
Mhm.
about, and we love being on the same page with each other on.
Yeah, and set really big goals. This is the thing that James has actually taught me is just go big. Set really lofty goals, because when you shoot for the moon and you land among the stars, I think is how the
Hmm.
saying goes. So it's like even if you miss your goal, you still have progressed
Yeah.
farther than you would have had you set that first goal, because I mean, we're human, and it's very often that we fall short of goals. And so when you just set lofty goals, you work twice as hard to hit them.
Yeah, there's this I think a misconception of setting really attainable goals out there, and I'm not saying just beat yourself down and like whatever, but we all have different things that motivate us and drive us. But I don't care what it is that motivates you or what drives you. What would you rather fail at? Would you rather fail at losing 20 pounds? Or fail at losing 2 pounds. Because if you succeed at losing 2 pounds and you lose 3.5 pounds, you succeeded at that goal. But if I set a goal to lose 20 pounds and I failed, I only lost 14 pounds. I still lost, what would that be, like 12.5 pounds more than, that
Right.
2.5. Yeah. So
And we're
it's,
using
or,
fitness goals just because that was something that we personally
it's
talked
easy.
about.
It's
It's easy. Yeah.
numbers. It's, yeah,
Quantifiable.
yeah, it's very objective, not subjective. So again, apply that to anything in life. I personally believe if you set lofty goals and fail, you will still be much farther ahead than setting those, just kind of really attainable goals. And then it's easy to get complacent once you attain that goal.
I
Yeah.
think the thing, though, that we need to kind of back up a little bit is those lofty goals, you set the attainable in between,
Sure.
because
Yep. Those milestones.
yeah. So
Yeah.
you had already mentioned, we set the lofty goal, but then we went through monthly and was like, these are like kind of like checkpoints.
Hmm.
Those were the attainable goals.
Sure.
And so, especially for me in my fitness journey, I shared this in a previous episode, was just I needed something that was sustainable and attainable as far as my fitness journey went, because
Hmm.
there were so many times that I would try things and I would get frustrated and I would quote unquote fail at it, and I would just give up because it wasn't sustainable and
Yeah.
attainable for me. So we're not saying like don't set attainable goals,
Hmm.
but don't be afraid to set those lofty goals either, and make attainable steps towards those lofty goals. Be realistic in the time frame, I guess,
Yeah,
too.
totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot of, or some of this concept is, comes from Grant Cardone, and I don't, agree with everything he says or whatever. It's kind of the 10X rule per se. But you usually regret setting too short or too attainable of goals more than you regret setting too lofty a goal.
And this is
So,
definitely not a goal setting,
oh
podcast that we're
yes,
trying
it
to talk
is.
about. But this was something that the reason that we brought this into the conversation is because once again, we wanted to communicate this and to encourage one another and to champion one another,
Yeah.
where it's like, hey, like I'm hitting my goals and it's like, good for you, high five, type of thing.
Yep.
And so, or encouraging one another and helping them along. There were several times like where I would, look at James and say, hey, can you help me be better about what I'm eating
Yeah.
or whatever, And so like when you know each other's goals, you know how to support one another. And so, another goal that we talk about regularly is just like, what do we want to do as far as like vacations for our family even,
Yeah.
or just like, it can be fun things. It can be hard things. It can be whatever, but what goals do you currently have, babe? Like, how can I help you attain those goals?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and honestly, that segues into the next thing that we talk about regularly. Do you have any frustrations or things that are really bothering you right now, or that you're dealing with? It could be at work, it could be at home, it could be anything. Honestly,
Yeah, there's been I shouldn't say so many times, but there have been several times.
if you only knew the number of
Yeah.
times. Yeah.
No, there have been several times though where I can tell where you're a little bit edgy, maybe a little bit shorter with me, and I'm like, man, what is going on?
Yeah, what did I do?
Like, what
Or-
did I
yeah.
do? And I'm taking it personally. So once again, this is where communication can help so much within a marriage. Is like, babe, are there any frustrations that are going on that I don't know about? And usually it's during those times where I'm like, I'm noticing you're kind of snipping at me. Like, did I do something or is there something else going on? And almost always it is an outside frustration that is manifesting itself,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
we're human and that's just going to happen. Those outside frustrations are going to affect how we treat people. It shouldn't, but unfortunately in our sinful state it does. And so it's like, if you came home and you're just like snipping at me and I didn't realize that, well, okay, something just happened on your job where you have the potential of losing. I mean, he's a project manager and so he deals with like really big numbers, so it's like, okay, you might be losing a couple $100,000 on a project. Like, that's stressful, and so there are oftentimes things that are going on outside of the home that do affect the inside. And so when we can communicate that, I can show him a whole lot more grace because I now know it's not me. I didn't do anything. It's just something is bothering him that is outside of any of our control. And I just need to extend a little more grace.
Yeah, yeah. She calls it she calls it my business voice.
He definitely
I
has
come
a really
home
good business voice.
I do. Yeah, I help lead relatively large company, and like you said, the numbers can be big. The stakes can be real high, and it doesn't make it any more important than you.
Right.
But it does.
And I want to say,
affect us,
you actually
right?
do a
Yeah.
really good job of not bringing
Thanks,
it home
yeah.
most of the time. So when he does start to snip, I'm like, okay, something's been compounding for a
Yeah.
while. And so now it's let's have a conversation because usually something's been going on for a while that I don't know about because he's so good about not bringing stress home. And so when it does start to manifest, I'm like, oh, there's something really big going on.
Yeah, when you have $7 million of receivables that are going over 90 days, then that can add stress to your life or whatever. But and the reason why I don't talk about them is just because I don't want to bring those home and those frustrations, because it's really not a burden that you need to bear or that the family needs to bear. But in my attempt at leaving that at work, it almost makes it worse if I don't at least let you know that there's something that I'm dealing with, or whatever.
And sometimes you don't even tell me specifically what
Yeah,
it is.
yeah.
It's literally just I'm just dealing with something at work and it's not you. And then
Yeah.
I can go, oh, okay.
Yeah.
Like, it's not me. And I can just let it go and just once again show you more grace.
Yeah.
So that is a conversation that, we need to have every now and then. And that I think is important. And, you
That
asked,
goes for the wife too, right?
Exactly. I was just
what
gonna
mean?
say that.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. In the home, I mean, there are so many things that, whether you worked outside the home or you're homeschooling or you're just being a mom or whatever. And when I say just being a mom, there are so many things that, like, I personally, I would have a very hard time, running the household like the way that you do, and that you do it with sympathy, compassion, empathy, and I would not
You would
excel
have a
at.
lot of really awesome systems
I
if
would
you were
probably
a
have some
mom,
great
but
systems, yes, but I would also really struggle with the patience side of things. But yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter what you do or where you're at or how you're doing. You could be a stay at home dad, whatever. Those are things where it's not, again, it's not like I'm hiding things, or not saying things that are happening at work because I'm trying to hide them. It's just because I think that I'm doing good, not sharing the burden, but it's adding a different frustration and a different, wedge between our open communication and things
yeah,
like that. So,
definitely.
yeah, so I think we can help each other if we're having regular conversations about, the frustrating things in life. So,
Yeah. So, I mean, we talked about talking about the fun things, the goals, talking about the frustrations, just again, communication is so stinking important. And so the last thing that we talk about
mhm.
regularly in our coffee dates is our overall family health. How is our family doing? Are we where we should be spiritually? Are we discussing God and spiritual things with our children often
Mhm.
enough? Are we intentional with reading the Bible with our kids? Are we, like a thing that we've been talking about a lot on this trip is, are we making the time to spend individual time with our kids?
Right.
We want to be more intentional with that. I mean, I think we do a decent job, but as they're getting older, we're finding that we're coming into a new season where I think they might need that one-on-one time, even more intentional to share what's on their heart.
Yep.
And so that's something that we've been talking about specifically on this trip that we are on right now, is
Yeah.
just how are we going to attain that goal? And it's something that we've noticed. It's not something that we've really talked about
Mhm.
before, but it's something that we're seeing a need now. And so having these little check-ins of like, do you see a need within the family of like something that we could be doing better or should be doing now in this new season that we're in? And so that is just one thing that
Yeah, like literally as simple as the bedtime routines,
yeah.
and making sure that we're on the same page with all of that, and just the family dynamics as each child gets a little bit older, and
Mhm.
there's just so many things. And honestly, we've had a lot of fun talking about it.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's if you're talking about these things, early on or before they become real issues, like I said, there's actually a lot of fun that can be had in having those conversations and communicating about it, rather than waiting until things are unraveling and
Yeah.
you're so much more reactive than proactive.
Mhm.
And it's just it can really lead to a lot of other issues, right?
Yeah.
And those things that creep into a marriage and creep into parenting, and kind of those disasters.
Yeah.
So
Another thing that we've talked about on this trip too is, will we regret not having our kids in more sports?
mhm.
And
Yeah.
that was something that we talked about. I know, I mean, it's not a super important conversation, as
Mhm.
far as like the spiritual health of our family, because whether you do a ton of sports or not,
Yeah.
for eternity, it probably really doesn't matter. But do we desire that for our family?
Yeah,
I
sports were a huge part of my life growing up, and things were kept in perspective. But I mean, I've played in literally hundreds or probably even thousands of sporting events, and at all different levels through college level, and
And our kids, like, they play sports, so it's
yeah,
not to say
yep,
that they don't, but we're not maybe pushing them into,
hmm
like, higher level sports because and that was something we discussed,
yeah.
like, do we desire to do that? And we kinda came back to the fact that right now we desire the family time because as soon as one child starts doing that, it really just becomes like
Yeah.
for us personally,
Is
like I
that
said.
is that what we decided? Yeah, I don't.
Yes, we
No,
did.
I'm kidding. Yeah, yeah.
I'm like,
No.
"You're throwing me here, we talked about this."
So no, and a lot of times we do talk about things here with you that are currently going on in our lives,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's part of the fun of this interaction with you and together
Mhm.
is these are things that we're going through in our lives right now, and probably things that you're going through in your lives, or maybe can help someone who's coming behind you, or maybe you are, 15, 20, 25, 30 years old, and coming into these different seasons in life, and they're just things that you can file away for, when you do come into the marriage season, that you want to just build a strong marriage and a strong relationship with Christ, so that you can also have a strong family.
Definitely. Yeah. And, going into the strong family, like that is one thing that we discuss regularly too, is just the overall spiritual health of each individual child.
Yeah.
Like we see, this going on in this child and this going on in this child. What are ways that we can be proactive together so that we're on the same team in continuing to help our children mature spiritually in the nurture and admonition of the Lord? And so, those are the 5 conversations that we, have regularly. I'm sure there's probably 20 other ones that we could have added to the list, but those were the top 5 that came to mind, ones that we have fun kind of hashing through regularly. And
and it can lead in so many different directions, like you said earlier. Maybe you have a completely different 5, but there's probably at least a few of these that if you don't hit them fairly regularly, you can just kind of fall by the wayside and maybe get off the same page with each other. So and again, like we said, kind of joked around a little bit about some of these can be really fun, and really they all can be fun if you have the right mindset, and add a cup of coffee in there, and man, you just can't stop me talking.
Once he gets his coffee, there is no stopping.
Yeah, exactly. I don't need much boost from an energy level standpoint, but mid to early morning. That can get me going.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I guess that's a wrap for this episode. So until next time, we want to just encourage you to continue to seek God, love your spouse, hug your kids, and stay devoted. Thank you for tuning in to this Devoted Life podcast with James and Shanda. We appreciate your support in sharing biblical, uplifting truths with the world. If you found value in this episode, please leave us a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. Your feedback helps us to improve the show, and we'd love to hear from you. Be sure to hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. To learn more about how to live a life devoted to God and family, head over to thisdevotedlife.com. You can also follow me, Shanda, on Instagram at devoted_motherhood. Thank you again for listening, and we look forward to seeing you next time on This Devoted Life podcast.